Hey, welcome back to another Bible Lounge. So, our previous video, we talked about heaven, and I really wanted that to be the final video on our eschatology series. But then I was scrolling through my topics and previously recorded videos, and I realized that I didn't have a video covering the tribulation. I've mentioned the tribulation in many of the es- eschatology videos, but I never actually have recorded a video on the tribulation. So I thought it was important to go ahead and do that. And so this video was all about the tribulation, making it what it is, defining what it is. And this will be then the final video on the eschatology series. So stick around to hear more about what is the tribulation. What is the tribulation? There is a tribulation coming that the Bible speaks of. This tribulation. Revelation seems to speak of this depending on your view of Revelation, but nevertheless there is this great tribulation, but also tribulation. There's kind of some people think there's a difference between the tribulation, great tribulation. We'll get to that later. But there is this tribulation that is coming on the earth. It mostly comes from Daniel, and we're going to look at that. So Daniel chapter 9, verses 24 through 27 actually speak of this. I'm going to read it and kind of cover each thing because it's a little heady. It's a little difficult to understand. So I'm going to go ahead and read it and break it down. So starting in verse 24 in Daniel chapter 9, it says this: 77s, and most translations I think are going to say weeks, are decreed for your people and your holy city to finish transgression, to put an end to sin, to atone for wickedness, to bring in everlasting righteousness, to seal up vision and prophecy, and to anoint the most holy place. That's Daniel 9:24. Very important. So this sets up what really is going to lead into the 7-year tribulation. But for now, in the very beginning, we see 70 weeks or sevens are decreed. So a week, in most interpreters, if not all of them, agree. I don't know anybody who doesn't. I'm sure there are out there, but that this word weeks refers to a year, a period of 7 years, really. So it's 70 sevens or 70, it's interpreting a week as in 7, right? 7 days, but instead of days, it's usually years. It's appropriately years. So it's really 70 7-year periods, right? You get that 70 7-year periods. That equates to 490. Now, it's important, I will say this from the beginning, that we don't know if this is Gregorian calendar years, that's our modern day years, or if it's the years time frame that they were using back then. We don't know exactly, but we'll just continue on. So these 490 years, or 77s, are decreed for Israel, and it says, for your holy city to finish transgression. So there's a purpose behind them. And here's the purpose: to finish transgression, to put an end to sin, to atone for wickedness. So to do away with sin is one of the primary reasons for this number of years that is decreed. Okay? To bring in everlasting righteousness, and to seal up vision and prophecy, and to anoint the most holy place. So to do an end with sin, to do an end with visions, to do an end with prophecies, and to anoint the most holy place. That is the reason for this 490-year period. And let's continue reading on. Verse 25, know and understand this. From the time the word goes out to restore and rebuild Jerusalem, until the Anointed One, the ruler, comes, there will be 7 sevens. And 62 sevens, it will be rebuilt with streets and a trench, but in times of trouble. After the 62 sevens, the Anointed One, this is talking about Christ, he's the Anointed One. So the Anointed One will be put to death and will have nothing. So Go back to the beginning. Know and understand this from the time the word goes out. The word to restore Jerusalem. This decree marks the beginning of this 490-year period. And historians have traced that decree until the death of Christ and have calculated it to be pretty much 483 years. So that's almost all but one of the 70-year periods has been fulfilled on when Jesus died. Okay? And so we move on. The people of the ruler, this is now the antichrist, the ruler, who will come, will destroy the city and the sanctuary. The end will come like a flood. War will continue until the end, and desolations have been decreed. Okay, so now we have the arrival of the antichrist. Verse 27, he will confirm a covenant with many for 1/7. So basically, he's going to confirm a covenant. It says with many. Most believe it's probably with Israel, but there will be this covenant the Antichrist will confirm, probably at the beginning of the 7-year period. I understand this as marking really the beginning of that 7-year period, or somewhere around there. And in the middle of the 7, so in the middle of the 7-year period, so somewhere around the 3.5-year mark of this tribulation, he will put an end to sacrifice and offering, and at the temple he would set up an abomination that causes desolation until the end that is decreed is poured out on him. So this ruler, this Antichrist, will make a covenant during this tribulation, or will mark the beginning of the tribulation. And then in the middle of the tribulation, he will break that covenant. He will set himself up in the temple and proclaim himself to be God, is what Paul tells us. And I believe that's 2 Thessalonians. And that marks the middle of the tribulation. So those last 3.5 years are going to be the worst 3.5 years the world has ever seen. It's going to be destruction. It's going to be almost quite literally hell on earth. I know the previous video we talked about quite literally heaven on earth when we're with Jesus forever, but this will almost quite literally be hell on earth. It'll be chaos. During that time, we know God's wrath will be poured out. It's a time of judgment. It's a time where the Antichrist and the devil are on the move, and Christians are being martyred. Believers will be martyred during this time. I keep hitting the mic. I don't know why I'm doing that right now. But and then there will be destruction of the elements, right? It'll be death. A third of the population will be put to death. The sun and the moon and the stars will be blackened. And so a lot of destruction and chaos, essentially all the way up until the end when Jesus comes. And we know in Revelation 19 that when Jesus comes, he destroys this beast, this Antichrist. That marks the end of the 7-year tribulation. And then believers are united with Jesus. The resurrection takes place, and he casts this Antichrist and his false prophet into the lake burning with sulfur, and then he sets up his, if you believe in the 1,000-year reign, he sets up the 1,000-year reign, and if you don't, then basically he just sets up kingdom on earth, and he destroys the devil, he puts him into hell, and then we have the end where we're on heaven on earth forever, right? And so that 7-year period is really what we see coming from Daniel. It is the primary. Daniel is actually known as the backbone of prophecy because a lot of prophecy regarding the Messiah, regarding this anointed one, regarding the Antichrist, regarding the end, the tribulation, all comes from Daniel. And so it definitely is going to be a time that nobody wants to be around. Matthew 24, of course, has plenty of stuff regarding the end. Let's see. In verse 15, it says, so when you see standing in the holy place, Matthew 24:15, so when you see standing in the holy place, the abomination that causes desolation spoken of through Daniel the prophet, let the reader understand, and let those who are in the Judea, because he talks about this person coming. Verse 20, let's go to verse 20. Pray that your flight will not take place in winter or on the Sabbath, for then there will be great distress, unequaled from the beginning of the world until now, and never be equaled again. Verse 22, if those days had not been cut short, no one would survive. So it's Jesus talks about this time. It's going to be a time that it is of great distress. And getting back to the tribulation versus great tribulation. So some interpret the tribulation as being all of it, the full 7 years, and some interpret then the 3.5 years, the second 3.5 years of the tribulation to be called the great tribulation. That's a possibility. We could say all of it is the great tribulation, but it most certainly is that second half, 3.5 years is a lot worse than the first 3.5 years. So I think that's a fair understanding. And yeah, that ends the series on eschatology. I really hope you enjoyed this series. If you have trouble understanding eschatology, go back and watch some of the videos. And, I just scratched the surface on all of these eschatological doctrines just to get your feet wet, just to show you the core of what these talk about. And, I leave it in your hands if you want to do any more study. Now you kind of have a framework. You have a foundation of what to look for, how to study these things. And I hope that I did a good job. I'm doing my best here to explain it simply and make it plain. And yeah, I'll just end it there. And I will see you on the next Bible Lounge.